Hi, I am the Sinister Porpoise, and welcome to my channel. When you think of sinister porpoises, think of the Sinister Porpoise. For the past several videos, whether you've wanted me to or not, I have explored programming and computer science topics. They're interesting, aren't they? Well, maybe not to you, but to me. This trend will continue in this video. Not only will this video discuss computer science, but it is going to discuss history, another of my favorite topics. Specifically, it is going to discuss two important figures. Even though they are important figures, they were not considered to be computer scientists, largely because computers wouldn't be invented in a working fashion for another 100 years yet. And certainly it wouldn't be recognized as a discipline until about 10 years later. Who are these two figures? I refer to British mathematician Charles Babbage, known for the difference engine, the Analytical Engine, and for getting annoyed at street musicians. No, I'm not joking about that. The other is Lord Byron's only legitimate daughter, Ada Augusta King, Countess of Lovelace. This video will focus on Lovelace's story and the controversies that surround her. We'll also try to correct some of the misconceptions I once held regarding her. The sources I used will be linked in the description below, as long as I remember. Please, if I don't, remind me, and I will not be snarky about it in any way, I promise. What are these controversies, you're probably asking, or at least should be, that surround the Countess, commonly known as Ada Lovelace? The first is whether she was the first computer programmer, and this one is easily solved. The second is more contentious and also very sexist, and it has to do with her mathematical abilities, because women can't do math ever. I shall attempt to unravel both these problems and prove her importance to computer science. Before we get into part 1, I would just like to apologize to everyone. This part was supposed to be filmed, but as usual my plans went exactly as I planned, and of course, I am not in any way trying to hurry things up because I've been promising this video for months, and finally got around to filming most of it. It just seems that one of the parts I filmed is missing and I don't feel like refilming it, so I'm just going to voice this part over. I promise you will see the new hat I got for this video. Ada Lovelace was taken away from her father early in her life. Her mother wanted to prevent Ada from inheriting her father's poetic temperament. It is likely that poetic temperament refers to the bipolar disorder that the poet may have suffered from. Despite Ada being Byron's only legitimate daughter, he never got the chance to see her. Her mother, Lady Anne Isabella Milbanke Byron, wanted to shield her daughter from her husband's more extreme behaviors and possibly his womanizing. As a result, Lady Milbanke directed her daughter to study mathematics and science because nothing will kill a poetic temperament like math. Unlike her womanizing husband, Lady Byron possessed mathematical talents of her own. Her contemporaries called her the Princess of Parallelograms. Despite being qualified to teach her young daughter, Lady Byron's position allowed her to hire tutors, such as Mary Somerville, who served as Ada's tutor for many of Ada's early years. In fact, it was Mary Somerville who would eventually introduce her to the man with whom her name would forever become associated. You probably already know that man's name was Charles Babbage. Other important figures in Lovelace's education included the mathematician Augustus de Morgan, who, if you study Boolean algebra, came up with de Morgan's law, with whom she regularly corresponded. Because Lovelace was born in the early 19th century, educational paths were not open to her that would have been open to men of her day. Great, that was fair. Unlike the men of her day, she could not formally study mathematics at the finest of British universities such as Oxford and Cambridge. She had to learn higher mathematics from the men who were willing to tutor her. Victorian beliefs complicated this process, as it was a common belief that delving too deeply into mathematics would adversely affect a woman's mental health. We still have that belief today, I think, but we just don't voice it. Despite this belief and the warnings from some of her mentors, Lovelace persisted in learning more advanced mathematics by corresponding with Charles Babbage and Augustus de Morgan. Improperly dated letters addressed to de Morgan would call her mathematical abilities into question in the 20th century. When she met Babbage, Babbage introduced her to the model of his difference engine. Babbage never succeeded in building this mathematical calculator, and the reasons for this are interesting, although maybe not too interesting. Engineers in Sweden eventually completed a working model, But why did Babbage's fail? Because although he was a competent mathematician, no company today would ever hire Babbage as an IT project manager. The project ran out of funding because of his inability to manage people effectively. Although Babbage did not commit fraud when he failed to build the difference engine, accusations that he had wasted the Crown's money in trying to build the device would follow him for the rest of his career. While the difference engine would have helped the British naval military strategy by removing many human errors from calculations, because machines never make mistakes, of course, Babbage quickly realized that the design could be improved upon. He hit upon the idea of the analytical engine, which could perform more advanced calculations. Unfortunately, Babbage saw the analytical engine just as an advanced calculation machine, and eagerly told the young Lovelace about his plans for it. Lovelace became enamored of his ideas and asked to see his notes. The two would work on the analytical engine together for years. At one point, Lovelace would be asked to translate a paper by an Italian scientist that covered how Babbage's analytical engine would have worked had it ever been built. In October 1843, 100 years before the first modern computers, Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, published a set of instructions for a mechanical, general-purpose computing machine in Taylor's Scientific Memoirs. The machine was Charles Babbage's analytical engine, and Lovelace's instructions, which we would now call a computer program, would have calculated the numbers of Bernoulli, writes Saul Charman Anderson in the October 2020 issue of Patterns. This program is what causes people to credit her as being the first computer programmer. This claim also causes her to be held up as a role model and hero for women in STEM fields. But the problem is, this claim isn't quite true. The real truth is a bit murkier because Charles Babbage wrote programs before Lovelace did, and he published them. Because academic credit is often given to the person who published his or her work first, this makes Lovelace the second computer programmer in the world. This does not mean that Babbage's coding skills would have been superior to those of Lovelace, because they weren't. Babbage's code, for example, contains branching structures, but does not contain any looping mechanisms, while Lovelace's code does. This will show something that still makes her an important figure in the history of computer science, and that is she understood the capabilities of the analytical engine in a way that Babbage did not. However, because Babbage's code predates Lovelace's code, credit for being the first programmer must go to Charles Babbage. It is unfortunate that he never saw exactly what the analytical engine could do. Lovelace, however, after seeing a Jacquard loom, suggested that computers may one day be able to write music, given the instructions they gave them. And we actually use computers to write music today, and we have had computer-generated music. This suggestion may in part have been a jab at Charles Babbage, who later in his life was known for his ongoing rants about street musicians. Way to go, Ada. Love that snark. Part of the criticism over whether Lovelace was the first programmer comes from criticism of her mathematical ability. There's more than a little misogyny to this claim, as you might expect, and sadly this claim was eagerly repeated by men, even though the claim originates in Dorothy Stein's biography of the Victorian mathematician. Stein claimed that Lovelace's mathematical abilities were far too poor, and she could not possibly have written her Bernoulli numbers program that appeared in Taylor's Scientific Memoirs. Critics also point out some of the errors she made or failed to correct in the Italian paper that she translated. Now, we all know that the people making these claims have, of course, never made any mathematical errors or failed to correct a typo in one of their own Facebook posts or Twitter tweets. As I pointed out earlier, Lovelace, who lived during the Victorian era, was the wrong gender to be able to attend college. Her education took an entirely different route. Instead of formally attending a university, as many of the men of her day did, she instead learned mathematics by correspondence. It is this correspondence that is the source of the controversy in the first place. But instead of relying on misstated letters, let's look what her math tutors had to say about her. When it comes to her abilities, her tutor, Augustus De Morgan of De Morgan's Law fame, wrote, "I have never expressed to Lady Lovelace my opinion of her as a student of these matters. I always feared that it might promote an application to them which might be injurious to a person whose bodily health is not strong. I have therefore contented myself with very good, quite right, and so on. But I feel bound to tell you that the power of thinking on these matters, which Lady L has always shown from the beginning of my correspondence with her, has been something so utterly out of the common way for any beginner, man or woman. But this power must be duly considered by her friends, with reference to the question whether they should urge or check her obvious determination to try not only to reach, but to go beyond the present bounds of knowledge. He goes on to say that if she had gone to Cambridge University, he would have considered Lovelace to be a first-rate student. Babbage, with whom she worked on the Analytical Engine for many years, said she had a peculiar ability, and she had an ability to grasp abstract concepts that many men of her day could not. Certainly, she grasped the future capabilities of the entire field of computers far better than Babbage himself did. And boy, we're lucky she did. There are other contemporary sources that praise Ada Lovelace's mathematical abilities. Sadly, as I stated before, this criticism stems from misdated letters and a little more than sexist idea that women cannot be important to math or do math at all, and that because of this, they should not be important to STEM fields in general. This seems strange when sexist attitudes caused many of the important early contributors to computer science to be female, such as Grace Murray Hopper, even if Alan Turing is credited with being the father of the discipline. There is one side note that should be brought up, and far more serious historians of Lovelace will point it out. She developed a system for betting on horse races. Unfortunately, it utterly failed. Her failure caused her to go about £2,000 into debt. This has led some scholars to speculate that her interest in statistics and gambling was an attempt for her to secure financial freedom from the Count of Lovelace in a time when women were not allowed to own property. If you want more details about this scheme, there are several historical journals with papers on it, and detailed notes about the scandal are given in Sidney Padua's graphic novel, The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, which I actually used as a source for this video, and it does include extensive footnotes. I would recommend checking it out. Why has Ada Lovelace's contributions become a subject of controversy? Is it even important that she gets credit as the first computer programmer when so many other early computer scientists, like Rear Admiral Grace Murray Hopper, Dorothy Vaughan, and even Jack Black's mother, have made so many important advances after computers were actually invented in the 1940s? Should I also highlight the contributions of transgender women and LGBT figures other than Turing who also made their mark? Maybe. Probably. Definitely. But it was not the focus of this video. Even though men now dominate this discipline, and there is a tendency to revere important male figures such as Turing, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs. For the last two, it's especially weird since Gates and Jobs were better known for being businessmen than they were for writing code. The attempt to dethrone Lovelace from her position is even sadder because a woman led the charge. Even if the facts I was taught when I was first learning to write programs in beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, more commonly known as BASIC, and Python is better by the way, are not true, Lovelace has earned her rightful place in the history of STEM. Though the truth is more complex than young girls getting into STEM might like, she is still a valid figure to look up to. But young women and LGBT young people looking for role models in computer fields should do further research. These figures are equally as fascinating as Lovelace herself, even if they do not capture the Victorian steampunk aesthetic that she does. There are lots of dieselpunk aesthetics, though. Thanks for watching this video. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video to anyone who might enjoy it. Share it to people who know the history involved better than I do. I would love to be corrected if I'm wrong. I would also just like to hear from you in the comments section down below. Please remember to check out my source links to make sure I even got those right. Finally, remember to be excellent to each other, and so long, and thanks for all the fish.